it would sound absurd to be like, well, the problem with like basically the whole art world in general is that it's imbued with like this atheist worldview, because it goes deeper than that. I think the issue, honestly, that I found is that once you strip away things like God or higher ideals from your worldview, it trickles down. And then when you get to the point of art making, I think that that's why the general art scene and modern art, not like modern art like abstract painting, but art right now, is the way it is, because in general, it's really obsessed with like these novelties of like, how can I do something new and shocking? How can I do something that's going to get me attention? What's my story? It's all about the individual, which is actually kind of like a perversion of the whole artistic process in and of itself. So I think that it kind of ties into what we were talking about before, because even though it's a few steps down the river, I think that it's like a worldview thing, that the artists, by virtue of being part of that world, almost always partake of. So then if you have someone like me and you drop me into that world where, I'm cracking out on like, how do these things embody God and these higher ideals, and how can these things uplift like the human spirit? It's almost as different as like taking someone who's like a biologist and taking someone who's doing, I don't know, like electrical engineering. Those things are kind of related, but they're also like totally different.
Yeah, Owen, I'd love to get your opinion on the art community that we have started on Pollinate, because I'm not sure that I totally agree with you that, all the artists aren't considering God in their works. I mean, I feel like that's a very, that's an opinion, but maybe not necessarily the full perception.
Okay. Yeah, totally. Well, I'm not familiar with like the specific artists, but I guess, if I had to say something controversial, that would kind of be it. I guess I'm also thinking of, there are artists who are into like the spiritual elements and things like that. But I guess if I was to be more refined, I feel like somewhere along the way, the art making practice in general kind of lost its way. Maybe there's some kind of break or decoupling from the higher purpose of art and tradition in general. So it's not like I'm going to point to one person and be like, oh my God, look at your work, you should be doing something differently. But it's more like when I zoom out and look at the whole thing in general, I just feel like something's up. I feel like most people sense that in some way. It's kind of hard to put my finger on, but yeah, I mean, that would be how I answered the question.
I guess I'm just giving people the benefit of the doubt because I'm really caught up in this whole simulation hypothesis theory and the idea that, we're just all creating micro worlds within our own perception of what reality is.
Sorry, Lev, I tried to run as fast as I can back because, as people know, this is my thing in the actosphere, the contemporary art world.
Well, but before we get to that, Nina had her hand up, and so I want to make sure that Nina.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So if you go to ninapaley.com and do a search on the word bargain, there is a piece of art. I made one piece of art, like gallery art. I was not commissioned by a gallery, but this piece is a commentary on what is called fine art. And
we do that right now?
Yeah, it's a quilt of a $10,000 bill. So I've never been.
By the way, loving these dancing Venus de Willendorfs.
Thank you.
That was from Cedar Masochism.
Seder.
I always get this wrong. Seder Masochism.
Thank you.
Every time.
Yeah. So I would have. I have no connection to the art world, as it is called. I can just read you this. Should I just read this?
Well, you do have a connection in a way to the lowbrow, like the comic art world. That was
that's not the art. No, I'm talking about fine. So the difference between fine art and popular art is one of money. So fine art is financial devices.
I don't know, but see, that distinction isn't as clear cut nowadays because a lot of what you would consider popular art or outsider art has been, in a way, colonized by the professional art world. For example, street art.
Right, but
example.
It becomes the professional art world. It becomes fine art when the pieces function as a form of currency for elites. That is the role of fine art. It is an investment object. The value of the fine art is based on trade. It's like
yes and no. Yes, Well, go ahead, Nina. Sorry, I'm cutting you
Anyway,
off.
that is it. That is the distinction between fine art and what I always thought of as art, which was anything. You know, when I was like illustration, right? Like stuff in newspaper, stuff in print, mass reproduced stuff. Popular. That's the difference, right? If somebody pays $50,000 for one of my pieces, that piece is going to be fine art.
No, the distinction I don't think is that. I think that fine art has its own history and genealogy. It has its own the sort of the mediums and the tactileness, and the fact that you're creating standalone pieces rather than what is an illustration, for instance, which is this series work that is creating a world unto itself.
But
Whether the piece creates a world, the singular piece creates. I know it's a very Heideggerian definition of art.
Fine art needs, like, the fine art can't be infinitely reproducible, right? Like if you print a whole bunch of things, that's not fine art. If you have a limited print, if you have a limited number print, that can be fine art. Because the fine art has to function as a currency.
But there were artists specifically in New York in that scene that crossed the line. I'm thinking of Philip.
Yeah, right. They crossed the line, but you know what's on each side of the line, right?
Right.
Also, just to be maybe a little, just to insert something interesting into the mix is that, like we were talking before, like we have all these worldviews, and then the worldviews inform everything else in a way that's usually not obvious. If you're a materialist and you're an atheist and the world is this just material thing, then we have no grounds on which to critique fine art and art as currency, because if the world is just atoms and we are just these meat pockets walking around, then art literally is a commodity. Then paintings are literally just another item to be traded,
Right.
So it's interesting because the worldviews we have, they inform on what grounds we have to even say that these things have value.
Georgia, what do you think?
Well, now I'm wondering, Nina, what's your take on digital art, and is it possible for digital art to be fine art?
Okay, so understand
No, I'm sorry. No,
Gio, really?
I'm such an elitist because I'm a real painter. I can't do it.
You have to take turns. Use the little hand symbol.
I'm offended everyone here. By the way, in the chat, Conscious Moss, I'm not ignoring your love. I love you, Conscious Moss.
We got a super chat from Conscious Moss. Can you believe that? $2 US.
Number one simp.
All right,
go ahead, Nina. Sorry.
All right. So art, when I say fine art, that's not like a judgment. It's a world. It's an industry. It is an industry. It is the world of galleries and the world of the people that buy it. There is money in what's called the art world. Lots of people make art, right? They're not in the art world. They're not in the art industry, the fine art industry. They might be in some other industry, right? Like if you're an illustrator, you might be in the publishing industry, or if you're a filmmaker, you might be in the film industry. And you might be making brilliant art in these industries, but if it's not being invested in and traded and represented as fine art by that particular fine art industry, then it's not fine art. That's not a judgment of the art. It's just, I know when people are talking about art, capital A art, fine art from, the sort of thing that's going to end up in a museum versus anything else. As far as digital art goes, I met a digital artist who she sold her pieces by selling the URL, and I thought that was really clever because
there were some early internet artists that would do stuff.
Yeah,
like
the
that,
URL is like a limited thing, right? Like any other, the whole thing with digital is that it's infinitely copyable, which is great.
But when you put a limit,
like blockchain.
But
if you use a blockchain, it's a similar thing. You're not getting domain, but you are still getting, I guess, cred for, like, Georgia, you attended our art on the blockchain event at the National Arts Club. For those who don't know, I am still the chair of the Art and Technology Committee at the National Arts Club in New York City in Gramercy Park. And Georgia,
every episode he's gonna
yes, you had your hand raised, so let me know what you think.
I was just thinking about Nina's definition of fine art, and I feel that these are the kinds of barriers that Pollinate, for example, is trying to break, that visibility, that connection for the artist to the world and to the people that want to interact with that art or become, owners of that art. And I think that there's been a lot of discrimination in the past and discrimination in representation, especially for female and diverse artists. And I think that that is going to shift, especially with digitally native generations coming into the picture who are, ready to be in this world and interact with it on the internet.
Yeah, well, what do you mean by owning the art?
Becoming investors or art collectors.
Right, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like if you invest in art, then the type of art that I make, you don't really invest in that particular way. I mean, you can. I also sell things, right? And I would dearly love, oh my God, I would dearly love it if my art quilts entered that art world. I would so love it. It's like that's where those quilts belong. They are like on walls and they should cost money and they're limited. And I would like people to invest in them and trade them and like that. But that doesn't make them more art than the stuff, that I just throw out there and beg people to make copies of. But some stuff inherently has like inherent limits to it, and therefore is it's a limited resource and a form of property, right? Like an art quilt is very limited and could theoretically gain in value because of its scarcity, whereas a digital image that I share and urge everybody to copy has a different kind of value that will never be monetary and will never function as a type of currency.
But what's interesting, I feel like you were saying about that act of subverting what we typically understand in internet culture as the digital, as the infinitely replicatable, and making that exclusive, to me is that sort of, in a contemporary sense, that artistic act. But what I was going to say while I was listening before, what you're doing, Georgia, with Pollinate, is that, New York was always a weird place, a weird mixing pot in terms of when the art world shifted, from Paris to London, then to New York. You had a lot of that sense of community in that they had similar influences from the old world. Specifically, I'm thinking of like Urshel Gorky, teaching de Kooning, and then de Kooning going off and teaching Motherwell, and even the female artists at the time, like Frankenthaler and Georgia O'Keeffe before she moved to the Badlands in New Mexico. It seems that there always was a community sense. But as the corporatized art world moved forward, it seems that a lot of what is going on right now in the contemporary art world, especially around New York, I know you got to zoom the dog.
All the dogs there. What can I do? Well, by the way, what's the name of your beautiful dog? Oh, you're muted right now. There we go.
Yeah. So this is Isabella Morkey. You can find her on Instagram as Isabella Morkey. She's actually a patron of the arts, and if you visit her Instagram, which is Isabella Morkey, Morkie, you'll see that she is very big in the art scene and loves to post images and support other artists. So.
Guys, follow Isabella Morkey right now.
Dogs have Instagrams now.
Yes, exactly. This is the world we're living in.
That could be some post-humanist type of discourse going on.
Oh, it's better than furries having Instagrams.
Shots fired!
But she has a special niche for a dog. She's an art patron.
Oh, there you go. But yeah, I feel that in some sense, because, and a lot of that art was mystical as well. A lot of the modern artists were Rosicrucians, for instance. Even like artists like Hyman Bluth was very well versed in the Kabbalah and in mystical Judaism, and his paintings that he worked years on for one at a time would embody that. But I feel that a lot of nowadays, that moment is sort of past because everyone is focused on creating a world onto themselves. And so every artist has to create a self-contained brand. And I don't know, maybe like someone like Georgia, maybe because you're involved in the art world, it could be different. But I feel like that community of artists, that school of artists is sort of like a thing of the past. Like that classification is like no longer there. But
I feel like you're almost describing art collectives, though.
yeah, there are collectives. Yeah. By the way, is that the
we just did, well, like I mentioned before, we worked with TMJ Arts Collective for 2 events called Soho Art Walks. And one of the collectives that emerged from that is the Soho Renaissance Factory, who we've connected with. I actually connected with one of the artists, Constance Patton, today on potential for future collabs. But they all were out in the streets at the beginning of the social justice movements that were very apparent in Soho, especially with the plywood going up. And just naturally, by osmosis, the artists came together and created this collective as they continued to find each other out, kind of on the same mission, which was to spread hope throughout the city. And now they're getting a lot of momentum, and actually that's why I was at the National Arts Club yesterday to see their show, because they were on they had an exhibit there yesterday.
Is everybody wearing masks there, or how's it looking?
Yes, all masks. You have to register the time slot you want to go, because I think they have limited.
Yeah, you're a trooper. What could I say? I don't know.
Actually, when I was there, no one was there, so it was,
Yeah. Aman Sadhu, what is wrong with you? This is a beautiful dog. In fact, we have a great comment for here about your beautiful dog. Let's see. Let me find it. Morky Kinship from Byzantium Archon. That says Morky Kinship. There we go.
I love that. Morky Kinship. That's nice.
Yeah, there we go. See, the chat is like double-sided.
Oh, Aman doesn't like me very much. That's okay.
Aman, what is wrong with you? You gotta.
I said death to all dog haters, so.
Yeah,
nice.
No good. No, seriously, everybody loves your dog, and the thing about the chat is that they are both nice and they are both naughty, because I think that there is this childlike aspect that they have.
The internet perfectly, Lev.
Yeah.
Nice.
Exactly.
What breed of dog is that? My mother just calls them Maggie dogs because of that commercial. With the Fancy Feast. So what breed is that called? She just calls it the Maggie dog because that's what the dog is called in the commercial.
Well, so, I like the Fancy Feast cat. I don't know, Georgia. You remember the Fancy Feast cat? It used to just
he's still around. Isabella does not like that cat when the commercial was.
Yeah, they're rivals probably. Yeah, they should. We should make a video game where they like fight each other. Anyway, Owen, what do you think of Morky? What do you think?
I do love dogs. I have a dog. I'm a huge dog enthusiast.
There we go. He's on your side.
If we're still going down the art road, it's something Gio said I was thinking about. I feel like possibly just in the interest of saying something controversial again. I think that you kind of zoned in on something that I was thinking before and didn't really articulate, which is that I think that, you said everyone has to have a brand. Everyone has to, it's like focus on the individual. I think that kind of perversion of the art space in general is one of the main things that people find odd about it. It's something that I experience. I mean, for example, not to like tell a whole anecdote, but I had times where I would go see art directors or like someone that owned a gallery, and I would show them my work. And the first thing they would ask me is like, okay, well, what's your story? Literally, like, well, who are you? Where do you come from? Where's your tale? Like, what's your story? Without even looking at all the art. And I feel like people sense that kind of perversion where the focus has been taken away from the art and put on the individual. I think it has to do with the ideologies that are popular in most major cities, where people have to be viewed through this lens of their own personal identifiers and how those identifiers dovetail with these like larger narratives that we're telling ourselves. But I think people sense that. And I think that was part of my like really big problem with it. Like you were mentioning older stuff, most sacred artists never signed their work. I mean, Michelangelo only signed one of his sculptures. If you look at any Tibetan, Nepalese, most Buddhist art, well, I could say Tibetan and Nepalese art, it's never signed. So I think that if we're talking about the art world, just something that maybe is interesting that I responded to was it's almost more about the people and not about the art. And I think that people like Andy Warhol and stuff like that, whatever you think about them, I think that it really introduced like a psychosis, like a literal insanity into the art world that I think that
and do you think it's a bit of a God complex?
Huh?
you think it's a bit of a God complex?
In the sense that it's kind of like worshiping the individual, maybe, but I think that word perversion is like a really good way to say it. Like, let me put it this way: no one would listen to, maybe they would actually, but in a certain way, I find it hard to imagine people would listen to music that is just bad to listen to because of who made it. I realize they actually do this, so this is not a good analogy. But in the art world, I think that's really common. I mean, one of my other favorite examples of that is I went really hard into like art theory stuff, I guess you could say, and I studied with this guy. I'm not trying to like pump myself up, but you could say he's someone who's like big in the field of like art studies and like semiotics and things like that. And we watched this Andy Warhol movie together. And I don't know how long it was, but I literally feel like it was like 3 hours, honestly. It's called Chelsea Girls. And most of the movie is just nonsense. It's literally people like sitting in the corner of this room, and then he's filming these people at a party, but you can't understand them. And it goes on forever. And at the end of it, he turns to me and he says, I mean, I'm in a class. It's not like me chilling with this dude. But he says, when they screened this in Paris, there was a standing ovation at the end for like 10 minutes. People lost it. So I asked him, I said, do you think if those people watched this and they didn't know it was made by Andy Warhol, would they still have liked it? And he said, that's a really interesting question. And he paused for a while and then he said, no. And in that moment, I was like, I'm fucking done with this shit, honestly. I was this is the root of the problem, where I go to a Chelsea gallery and it's more about like, I mean, I don't know how controversial I should be right now, but it's like, look, this artist is from this artist is from this country and they have this particular hardship.
Trans woman
they belong
of
to
color.
this subgroup and they overcame this obstacle. And that's why you should like these paintings. And I'm looking at the paintings and I'm like, I honestly don't care. They're like, whatever her story is, I literally don't care, because I'm just going to look at art and participate in the art. And it's not really hypocritical, because that's what I want for me. I mean, you can see I have an avatar. I'm anonymous. I don't want it to be like, oh, Owen, he's that guy who, you know, he did this and that's why this art is cool. Like, I tried as hard as possible to get away from that. And yeah, I feel like it's a form of like psychosis that basically permeates like the art world.
Well, to be fair, Owen, there's also OPSEC involved.
Because
OPSEC involved with being anonymous too, but
I completely agree with you, Owen, because I think there's enough films by filmmakers out there that people either love because it's the filmmaker that they love, or they hate because the filmmaker they hate. And you definitely have meme directors like Ava DuVernay who would have no recognition whatsoever for her garbage movies if it wasn't for the fact that she's Hollywood's token black woman director that they only have one of.
Like Sofia Coppola before her. That's right. But
excuse me, Lost in Translation is fucking nasty.
Lost in Translation was like if normies became weebs, okay? That's Lost in Translation. Sorry, I'm kidding.
But yeah, this really, identity politics permeates all culture, and you just witness what happens to like J.K. Rowling, right? J.K. Rowling says that actually being female has shaped her life. And then she gets mobs of people saying she's transphobic, and
well, that's because they all grew up on Harry Potter.
People are burning her. It's like, why can't you like the book if the author actually acknowledges biological sex? Like, now you can't watch the movies. And with Sita Sings the Blues, there was this. It was less of a big deal back then, but this idea that a white Christian woman was denigrating the sacred Hindu text. They assumed I was Christian because I am pale and from the United States, therefore I'm a white Christian woman. In fact, sadomasochism was in some respects a response to this. But it's like people care way more about the artists than they care about the work. And, there's really reprehensible artists. Most artists, probably the majority of artists, have personality disorders and are awful people. And they make great work.
I just wanted to add something to that, because I worked as an editor a couple years for a literary magazine, and we were one of like the few literary magazines where when we read submissions, it was my job to do this. I took the names off, so the editor couldn't see who it was. The majority of literary magazines, and I would say probably the literary field in general, they don't do that. Like, the name plays just as much, even perhaps a bigger role than the actual work itself. I remember there was a story where someone had I think he was a white male, and he used an Asian name because none of his stuff was ever accepted. when he changed his name, suddenly they started accepting his stuff. And, it wasn't as if the quality of his work changed or anything. It was simply because they wanted a certain type of writer to advertise it, and the actual contents didn't really matter as much.
I know exactly who you're talking about. I think that guy won an award, actually. I know exactly who you're talking about. I think he won like a poetry award.
But it's also
there was a Canadian director recently who claimed to be Indigenous, but she was only like a fifth or something like that. So
look at Elizabeth Warren. Do you remember what happened?
Pocahontas.
No, but if I may push back, Lev, against what people are saying, the consensus, not defend, because a lot of like what I see in the contemporary world is of course terrible, but I think there is a psychosis, but it's because and this isn't my agreement, this is John David Ebert in Art After Metaphysics, which I highly recommend everyone reading. It's because the artist has to deal with the collapse of grand narratives and the sort of the almost near apocalyptic post-war period where cultural, religious, and philosophic signifiers in the West totally broke apart. And now we live in this globalized mix, this neoliberal hell world. And the artist has to take up this mantle of creating a micro world upon a micro world in themselves. And there is a degree of psychosis that comes about with that because there is no greater referent there. Although there is some artists, and I would consider Owen Cyclops being one of them, who are trying to recapitulate a grander narrative. And when it comes specifically to Andy Warhol, now Robert Hughes is one of my favorite art critics, and he just really hammered Andy Warhol like nobody else. But he is, to defend Warhol, what he was doing, I feel, and this comes from the fact that he was deeply a religious Catholic, is that he was critiquing that cultural moment that was starting to come about with the death of the avant-garde in the 60s, with the mass reproduction, with the death of the aura in art, in the work of art. And so he was putting a mirror up to contemporary culture and saying that now the work of art has become fundamentally exploded from its significance. Therefore, the mass object becomes the aesthetic object. And Andy Warhol, with his films like Chelsea Girls, created purposefully this godlike aura around himself because he was critiquing that celebrity culture that he fundamentally became a part of. So all of these celebrities and all these people that worshipped him back in the day, they didn't get the point. It was almost like he was trolling them. At least that's my generous take on Andy Warhol. It's just because I'm a fan, so I have to defend him. And so it's like, I feel that there's a hidden meaning there to why Andy Warhol created this monumental celebrity around his artistic brand. And I feel he did that purposefully. But then people that came later that cargo culted that same personality, like Jeff Koons, for instance, they don't get it. They terrible. Just
I totally
gutless
agree.
capitalism. Yeah. So
no, I totally agree. I wouldn't say it's like he did something bad, but I think
no.
It's like you're looking for the root of this strange plant, and it definitely flows through there. Put it that way.
Oh, Nina's got her hand up. Nina?
Yeah. So people keep talking about artists. Can everybody tell me what is an artist? I know people say what is art? We can never answer that, but you are actually talking about artists. So really seriously, when you have talked about artists today, who are you talking about?
Oh,
me?
Shit.
Me. Anyone. Well, I'm talking about anyone who makes visual art. I guess that naturally prompts the question of what is visual art and what is art. Mm-hmm. But I would say anything that's done, anything that humans do could be considered an art. But here I'm thinking of visual art specifically. I guess actually, I'm just thinking of art because I am thinking of like performance artists and things like that.
Yeah, so. Yeah. There has to be a comportment towards what is art itself. I feel that there has to be a behavior in action that is taken that is within the aesthetic and artistic referent. Whereas if someone is like, but then again, people, they look at it and they're like, well, why is that Joseph Byers goes in a gallery with like a wolf and he's dressed like a homeless man? And why does he paint his face gold and talk to a rabbit? Why is it that Matthew Barney does these weird performances? I don't know why. That's the problem I feel, is that there has been an explosion, or rather an implosion, with what is the work of art itself. And plenty of performance artists who have done monumental works that are evanescent by their very nature. One of my favorite being Anna Mendieta. But it's just, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think
it boggles my mind.
The simple way to put it is, if I like it, it's art, and if I don't, it's product.
Sure, that could work. But one I think big aspect, which I think personally may be tapering out, I think, I know, Georgia, if you would agree with me on this or not, but with the whole Donald Trump phenomenon these past 4 years, it has driven people so crazy. You know, people were so out of their mind, just like on all this high energy, regardless of which way you put it, you know, whether people liked him or hated him. The point is that it created this energy of back and forth battle between what appears to be two different sides, and I personally disagree. I think that there are many things to learn from different people, regardless of what their political affiliations are. I mean, this is kind of why we do the show BTR, because we are bringing different kinds of people here. But when it comes to, let's say, wokeness, you know, that whole idea of, you know, critical race theory and all that, I think it's on its way out. I think that there was a high point right now with the Trump administration where it was kind of like a very heavy pushback on a lot of his rhetoric, which I think did cause there to be more of a need for, let's get people who are not represented. And I can understand, I mean, look, with history, there are histories here as well as histories in wherever you look at it, like India with the Dalits, with the delete underclass, the untouchables as they call them. You know, China, they have their own underclasses. There, wherever you go, there's always going to be some underclasses and some injustices that take time to rebalance. And I think right now what we are seeing is a big swing of the pendulum to the other way, where, you know, people are looking for, like, who are the people that would have otherwise been ignored that we can highlight. And I think that eventually, my hope is that things are going to even out so that people would be judged more for the content. I mean, in this case, not so much the content of their character, a la Martin Luther King, but more of the content of what they're able to put on the canvas, what they're able to imagine and put on whatever other medium, as opposed to any other, like Owen was saying before, where are you from? What's your story? What's your, you know what I mean? Like, my hope is that that would not be as important as the actual work, which will shine or not shine, again, based on the perception of the people who are looking at it. And I think that there is an element of good, interesting things rising up organically. But I don't know, Georgia, that's at least what I think is going to happen. But I'm curious what you think and what the rest of the panel thinks. And then we're also going to bring in my friend John Chavez.
Yeah, it's super interesting topic. I think that there's going to have to be an evolved state of mind and understanding of perceptions for us to reach that level. Honestly, I still think that it does matter in some ways. It will matter to a lot of people what the world is of the artist who's creating the art, who's creating these worlds that you're looking into, and understanding who that person is going to impact everyone no matter what. But it's interesting what you're saying, though, because I was thinking about how we're in this bubble in New York City. We tend to be in this bubble of liberal open-mindedness, and it's very easy to watch the news that I like, CBSN, and sip my coffee and feel like everything's okay. They talk about the domestic terrorists that attacked our Capitol, but I was thinking about this bubble and trying to think about my perceptions of outside this bubble, and I watched Fox News this morning just to switch things up, and they didn't call the people who attacked the Capitol domestic terrorists. They referred to them as the movement, and it wasn't highlighted in a negative way. It was highlighted as this aspirational movement, and it was very striking.
Or to
controversial take. That was an artistic act. No, I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm
I mean, to switch.
Don't worry about it. Please.
To switch it up, like when there were the BLM Antifa protests / riots going on, one side called it protests, the other side called it riots. So it's interesting how people observe these things in another, in different direction. Me coming from USSR, I was born in Soviet Russia. my personal perception is that when you have any society that, let's say, forces you to like put up a sign, whether it's somebody who forces you to put up a Trump sign, or whether it's somebody who forces you to put up a BLM sign, you know, so that your business does not get smashed, then there is some discombobulation going on here that is not being properly addressed. And this is also like why we're here, because I think that there are these, you know, perceptions that people have of the world, and it's on both sides that I think should be addressed, you know, thoroughly by going through the details, by going through what are the unintended consequences of whatever action you want to do. Because, like, if I'm wrong about the way that I see things going, either in the art world or in entertainment or whatever, then the alternative is there never will be satisfaction. There never will be a time when you will be able to say, okay, this is enough, everybody is equal now. So I think that there is, if things don't change, you know, inside the heads of people, if people don't start listening to people they disagree with, then I think there is going to be this kind of purity spiral where how's it going to be enough? It always needs to be more. It always needs to be, you know what I mean? And then it gets difficult. Like, I don't know, Owen, since this is the show where you are the head she, so to speak, do you know what I'm talking about here? And like, what do you think awaits us down the road there? And would you offer any olive branch, anything to people who may disagree politically or religiously or whatever, that we would be able to come together over our, let's say, basic humanity and love for each other?
Yeah, man. Well, it's probably the most topic that's like the most interesting to me, honestly, what you just brought up, because I never really expected that this whole, like, what I would call like an epistemic divorce, like this divorce of worldviews, would become like one of the defining features of my life, but it really has. I mean, it's been probably like 6 years that I've been like way too obsessed with tracking all the different aspects of this like thing that didn't start, but I kind of noticed it was like a weird thing. Like my friends are saying some weird stuff. Like, why are you saying that? And then you ask them and they can't really explain it. And now it's a little bit in the popular consciousness. And then now I feel like it's literally the dominant mode of thinking. Easy. So on the one hand, yeah, the thing I love the most is talking to people who have different views, whether it's friendly or honestly, I even enjoy like just straight up like debating. It's like something I really like a lot. So on the one hand, yeah, I mean, I'm the most enthusiastic about talking to people with different worldviews. The other half of that is that you said you think it's going to get better. I really don't. I really think that it's actually just starting, and that what you're seeing right now, I would encourage everyone to like really think really hard about this at a time when you have time to think about it. Not that you haven't already, but maybe no one said this to you yet. It's only going to get way worse, and the break is permanent. The break is so large that people on one side and the other side literally are experiencing completely and totally different realities. Like 100
tunnels, yeah.
That's why it's one of the reasons I wanted to work on the apocalypse. Because the apocalypse, Revelation is like the ultimate split, right?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. But yeah, I mean, anyway, so to wrap up my answer, like, yeah, I think that the split is so large. That's part of why I enjoy talking to people about stuff like that. Like I said, I've literally spent like 6 years of my life way too obsessed, like every day with like thinking about this basically all the time, because I live here in red state land now. I used to live in blue state land. And when I go between those two places, I mean, I might as well be going between like France and China. I honestly think it might even be bigger. Honestly, I'm not even trying to be like dramatic.
Right. Yeah, there is a lot of Francophilia within the Asian art world, but within the Chinese art world in particular, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but
yeah, no, there is. So anyway, to wrap it up, I do think that the gap, that's part of why I enjoy talking about it, but I think that gap is so wide that I don't expect it to be bridged or anything. I mean, even like the last year, some people lived in reality A and some people lived in reality B. And of course, like I have strong opinions. I think I'm right about stuff. I feel like most people think they're right about stuff unless you're like a total relativist. But even taking a neutral view, I think the gap is way bigger than anyone thinks.
Well, I agree that things are definitely getting worse, but I also think slowly people are starting to grow tired of the government's bullshit and everything, as we can see with both the insurgent and now everything that's going on with, Wall Street today.
GameStop gate.
Yeah, just to be clear, wait, I don't want to interrupt you, but just to be clear, I only mean worse specifically in the sense of the gap. I don't mean necessarily a decline in the quality of life, but I mean the gap is only what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh, the quality of life decline will follow. Don't worry about
Well,
it.
how would you?
If we look at the way the establishment, sorry, this is for the tomorrow show, but
okay, just real quick, just to play devil's advocate for the establishment, which I have been doing in other episodes. If we have this idea of there being this out of control energy where, like Antifa still protesting, but again, it's like a lesser protest than it was before. You notice like Georgia and New York City, there were like on Martin Luther King Day, and then I think the following day or the following week, there was a protest that was going on. It was pretty small. There were BLM flags, there were transgender flags, and it didn't seem as powerful as it was before. So part of me wonders, and I say this in previous episodes, you guys who know about this are already sick and tired of me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway for all the new people. I think that there is an aspect of the quote-unquote elite, whatever you want to call, people who are involved with government, finance, whatever, that there is still an aspect of wanting things to be relatively peaceful, business as usual, and when it comes to there being like rabid SJW, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, like it seems like it's a tool that is utilized for certain gains, but then, Biden's not really returning Antifa's calls. Even though it would have been beneficial, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, you could see that it was, in a way, beneficial, at least it turned out to be, I guess, with this election for this for this group of people to come out and do the protests and all that stuff. And now it's like they're, because they voted for Biden, they did not vote for Trump. And so now that you had them, they vented out their anger, they vented out their frustrations at the system, their calls are not being returned and they're being ignored once again. So the question to me is, if the establishment ignores them now and casts them aside, then why would they want to elevate them further? Because they're not elevating them right now, except for very, how do I say it? Because like all this
symbolic,
symbolic, just like, petty, like little things that look visually like something big and great, at least in the press, but really it doesn't change that much about this country at all. So, you know what I mean? Like there has been for the longest time this element of let's show flowery things so that people like the flowery things and they go on our side. And both sides, like I'd say Trump showed a lot of these flowery things with the way that he saw the world, and people who were fans of his, they were into that. So people say flowery things. It doesn't mean they're going to do the flowery things. And that's why, just to counter Owen's argument a bit, unless there may be something that I'm missing here, it seems to me like during political tension times, these more extreme sides end up getting used, and then they end up getting cast aside, and there is a period of normalization. And as far as what happens after, I don't know, but Owen, would you, before we move on to John, would you have anything you would want to respond with about that?
Yeah, definitely, because those street level conflicts that you're seeing are just a symptom of the conflict between, it's actually, let me rephrase, it's not really a conflict between two ideologies in the way that people think it is. It is a conflict between two modes of organizing society, and it's not ideological in my opinion, like top down. It's actually a bottom up phenomenon, which is also the thing that no one realizes. Like if you look at a country like, for example, Singapore, if you go to Singapore and you go out in a public square and you start talking about how bad Islam is or how bad the Quran is, they can arrest you. But why? It's because Singapore is a country where you have all these different kinds of people packed together so tightly that when they started the country, they realized that they couldn't have freedom of speech. Otherwise, someone would light this powder keg up. So then you look at the US and you're like, well, why is all this stuff coming up now? It's because the material conditions on the lowest level are changing. And it's trickling up. It's not trickling down from the top. So then you see these conflicts between like Antifa, and then they go home, and this group, and then they go home. But it doesn't matter because you have this larger scale premise for what society is and how we should organize it. And that's what's coming into conflict with each other. I mean, I don't know where you guys live, but like even out where I am, like how many people do you meet that really actually believe in free speech? It's not that many people. But
I mean,
why?
Considering I'm in
Nina's raising her hand.
NYC.
Oh,
or something like that. So anyway, I'll pass it off to someone else, but that's kind of my answer, because it's ideas about how society should be organized and what those fundamental premises are. that are in conflict. It's not like, you know, your racist uncle and like your woke niece. They're symptoms of these changing material conditions. And because the material conditions are changing, it's like, you know, it's like changing an animal population within a country. Whether you want to or not, it's going to change the everything about everything
what do
about
you mean
everything.
exactly? What do you mean by material conditions? Just so I'm a little bit clearer about what you mean.
In that you are looking at a situation where, how do I want to phrase this? Well, we're becoming more like Singapore. I'll phrase it that way. I'll phrase it in a positive sense. We're becoming more like Singapore, where instead of being like a nation where at least basically everyone's Christian, at least most people are, you know, from this ethnic group. Maybe there's some people from this ethnic group. We're becoming more like a nation like Singapore, where you have, when you look at the pie chart, it's getting more even. And you could say that's good or bad, but that's the kind of material conditions that are changing. So you, like in Singapore, you can't have a situation where someone says, hey, why are all these Chinese people here? Why don't we kick these Chinese people out? And a bunch of people would say, yeah, maybe we should. And the government says, whoa, we got to have a country here, buddy. Let's keep it under
So
wraps.
it's very iron fisted in the sense of people of different cultures coming together and getting along. Now it's interesting, like I'm from Brooklyn, and we have here people who are Chinese, people who are Jewish, people who are from Ukraine, and you know, everybody gets along relatively well. But at the same time, culturally speaking, people are within their enclaves and they don't really associate with each other except for when they go shopping. And
that's
even
Canadian. That's Toronto,
yes.
Canadian multiculturalism.
Well,
right there,
even there, like they have their own shops. Like for example, the Jews and the Muslims. There is a particular neighborhood a little bit more north of where I am, where they live pretty much side by side. It's like Israel, you know, because in Israel you also have within Israel itself people who are Arabian and people who are Palestinian, Arabian, and Jewish, you know, Ashkenazi Jew as well as Sephardic Jew, and they're all living together. But you know, like they tolerate each other. The Arabian people also have a lot of benefits. Like if you were to ask the Arabian people living in Israel where would they rather live, Israel or Palestine, I doubt that they'd say they'd want to move to Palestine, because there are a lot of, you know, good things that Israel is offering the people who are living there. And I think having creature comforts does ease a lot of tensions when it comes to differing cultures, because there is a lot of antagonism within, you know, like I'm not going to pretend that we are living in a rainbow society where everybody loves each other. You know, people, unfortunately, sometimes people fight, and sometimes people fight over stupid things, and I wish that we could all get along. But I don't really know how exactly to address it other than saying that if we educate more people, like I personally think, like if we get more education to people in the sense of treating other people like you would want to be treated, while at the same time still allowing for aspects of their culture as far as food, certain festivals, traditions like that to still be alive, that I think would be a very good mix. I don't think we are at that point right now in many different places. Thus, I think maybe that would precipitate the tension you would find, let's say, in more urban areas. But even here, like in New York City, like Georgia, you don't see anybody fighting right now. I mean, there are still like youths and hoodlums and things of that nature that are going on because the crime rate has upped itself. But really, like, you're not going to fight with your, you know, like with the Chinese people at like the Chinese restaurant or whatever, you know, like everybody's cool with each other. So it really has to go to a bad point economically for tensions to rise up. But right now, Georgia, like you're not seeing that, and I'm not seeing that either, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, there we go. So like Owen, when we're talking about like New York City, these tensions, they're not there. It could be because of the creature comforts, like I mentioned before. Would you say that as things get worse, from the people who are not as educated, who do see there being, you know, like less of a chance to economically prosper, then their focus may go into a focus that an un-iron-fisted Singapore would be in?
Well, just to be totally clear, because like totally unpacking it would take a long time, but just to be totally clear, the issue isn't in and of itself those conditions. Like, I mean, Singapore is the most prosperous country in Southeast Asia by like a long shot, right? I think the issue is that subtextually it's coming into conflict with the classic idea of America and what America is. And I think that is the source of the tension. When I see these, like you were talking about Trump and people who like Trump and people who hate Trump, it's really like those are two different nations, in the sense that the people that like Trump and are on that side are sort of the classic, frankly, like old America, where it's like, well, we have free speech and blah, 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 and all this stuff, you know, and then I could say the negative things too. And then the other side is like, well, we have, we tolerate people of all different kinds, and therefore you can't be hateful about X, Y, and Z. And we have to make sure that this, whatever. So the point is that I think that conflict, and frankly, the fact that people aren't allowed to talk about it, is the source of the tension. I think that if there was no limits on what people could say and talk about, then people could talk about it. Because like I said, there's plenty of prosperous countries that have like situations like this. But I think that it's a lot of that clamping down that's kind of making
that's creating the tension.
It's
making it into a pressure cooker instead of a teapot. Let me put it that way. A teapot has as much pressure as a pressure cooker, but you have a way to get the steam out.
Georgia?
To that point, I think something that happened in New York City through the street art that happened since the social justice movements, that was in a lot of ways an outlet, also kind of showing that vision of hope and healing and progressiveness.
Or as I like to call neoliberal kitsch. No, I'm sorry.
Wait, also, I want to say one other.
Right.
But that is an interesting point that Georgia brings up. I would just contrast that by saying that I personally think it would be better if not for, let's say, white Americans then kneeling or laying down in prostration, because in a way it turns it into some kind of a religion as opposed to a chance for unity and healing, where you would be in a way lowering yourself down and showing, look how wonderful and noble I am. I'm going to lower myself down. I'm going to go on my knees. There is something religious to me about that that I don't think is the best for coming together as equals, saying like, I'm your brother, you're my sister, and, regardless of where we come from, there is a certain thing that we're all aspiring to. And personally, I think that is the key right there. Like, my vision of America is one where there is a particular culture, a particular civilization, that regardless of any different, folk art or religious ceremonies or food, that would be something that would be in a way dictated again by the elites who would set a certain tone for society. That would be a culture that people can strive to. So let's say if you were living in Spain, the culture you would strive to means that in your education you would have to learn about Cervantes. If you were living in England, you would have to learn about Shakespeare.
We haven't evolved to that neutralization yet, so you can't really, how do we get to that point where, things can be equal? You have to take some steps back and reflect.
I would love to. Sorry, I know I'm kind of like monopolizing stuff, but
no, you're the dude here in the conversation. So go for it.
Just one thing really quick. I just want to make sure, what I'm saying isn't like taken out of context. You said the New York City thing, and you guys don't have that in New York City, and that's the thing is the reason that's the case is because there's a worldview uniting those people. So yeah, you can go to Brooklyn into a neighborhood that has probably the most immigrants. I mean, it definitely competes with anywhere else in the country. But because of the sort of understood larger scale worldview of like, this is a multicultural city, this is how it works here, that's what prevents like that kind of thing from coming up. And in New York City, when you do have certain groups next to each other, you do get those conflicts actually. But also just one other thing you said, you said like progressing towards a neutralization. The thing is, after living in Brooklyn, I think that it's very interesting because no one wants to progress towards neutralization. Neutralization is actually a negative feature. When you go into like places in Brooklyn, those people that live in like a Chinese enclave who are being Chinese, they don't want to not become Chinese. That's fine. That's great for them. But it's just interesting because now I'm showing my own biases. But I think that
the quality to what Lev was speaking to.
What'd you say?
I meant it in the context of what Lev was speaking to, and the way that society would be divvied out in certain structures of understanding.
The way that society would be divvied out in terms of certain ways of understanding.
Lev.
Well, when it comes to what Georgia was talking about right now, like I said before, I don't think we're going to get to a point where anybody will be able to say, okay, we made it, now we're equal. I really can't. I think that this is something where if the idea is how can we make ourselves equal, nobody will ever say no. There's too much invested in it. As far as there are going to be people who, let's say, would also stand to make money from it. Opportunists, people who come in and say, no, this is not enough, we need to do more. And then there would be people who are true believers who would say, no, we cannot stop it, we need to do more, even if conditions are better than they were 10 years ago, better than they were 20 years ago. So exactly like, when do we say when? When do we say, okay, this is it, everybody is equal now, we can now, from this point on, treat everybody equally? Like, that's what
It'll be
I
a year
don't know.
zero, in other words, Lev.
I mean, it's a difficult question. I don't know the answer to it. The only thing that I can say is one way of addressing it is for there to be people on top who, let's say, may be more cynical when it comes to a lot of these things, but at the same time value having a very high-functioning civilization, and they would be able to set a tone and set a culture that would, let's say, incorporate the greatest things that have been produced so far within that particular culture. So, for example, Georgia, if we're talking about Alexander Pushkin, he was responsible for the creation of the modern Russian language as we know it today. He was the grandson of, you could say, like an African slave boy who was brought to Peter the Great as a gift. Peter the Great raised him as his own son and got him into high positions because of merit, because that little boy grew up to speak several languages and was incredibly smart and incredibly effective at his position within the Russian government, within the imperial government. And then his grandson became Alexander Pushkin, who was, mix of African and Russian, and he was responsible for, again, he was an absolute titan of the Russian literary, poetry scene, and nobody forgets that. Putin is still praised to this day. Putin, oh, what is wrong with Pushkin? Pushkin is still praised to this day. People don't care at all what the color of his skin is. And the idea for me here is that I am never going to put Pushkin and somebody who's like, I don't know what example, like, I always pick on Cardi B, but just like putting in somebody who's like, whose artistic merit is not that high, regardless of whether they share the same skin color. I would never put them in the same category ever. And what I want, and I think it's very possible today, is for people to have the same kind of mind when it comes to who are the figures in the art world, in whatever sphere that we will elevate up as an example to everybody else to say, yes, this is like Shakespeare, this is like Pushkin, this is like, whatever. And this is something that everybody should aim for, and that would be the high culture. And that would be the high culture that other people can then enculturate themselves within, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of who they come from. And people can still have their enclaves and their festivals and different foods and stuff like that if they want to. But as far as what is something that would unite people as opposed to separate them, I think that would be the undertaking that needs to happen. Owen, what do you think?
I was muted. My bad. I actually just said if no one's going to say anything, I can definitely jump in. The thing is that what you're talking about is sort of like the fundamental like political question, in my opinion, which is like what unites people, which is something people rarely ask themselves. And the thing is, it's usually people oversimplify it. And I think that leads to a lot of kind of like very extremist conclusions. Like you get people who are like, well, it's just religion. You get people like E. Michael Jones, for example, who are like, literally what unites people is just religion. If everyone was Catholic, they'd be like one people group. And then you get people who are on the total opposite end where they say, no. What unites people is just race. If everyone was just one race within this sphere, everyone would be totally united. And then you get people on the left who are like, well, actually what unites people is class. And if everyone was just this one class, then those people are actually the people who are united. But
how would you live as one class? That's kind of weird.
Well, whatever. You know what I'm saying? People are like, you're a Catholic white person, you're a Muslim Arab person, but actually you're both lower class. So that's what unites you. I'm just kind of speaking, But the point is that what actually unites people, in my opinion, is what I would call peoplehood, which is being part of a people, which is more complicated. It's part culture, it's part ethnicity, it's part religion, it's part socio-historical circumstances. It's also intrinsic. So it's really, really complicated, but I don't think it can be faked. So the thing is...
You can't just like... This is what I meant before by neoliberal kitsch, which is a term I created, not meant just small bug man. I created the term on Twitter. No, I'm kidding. He's a great dude. We should have him on the show one day.
And I also don't want to forget John Chavez. I want to get to you very quickly soon. But yes, Gio, go for it.
But no, what I mean, like when you talk about protest art, this ties into what we're saying in terms of identity, in terms of what unites a people. I feel that a lot of the art that's at least nowadays being ostensibly supported by factions within the current arrangement of whatever you want to call it, the elites, power structure, so forth, etc. what I term neoliberal kitsch is sort of like a mock of sentimentality that is not just beneficial to the structure of the neoliberal order as it is, but also a sort of deification and a sanctification of certain secular iconography that borrows from religious art. So, for example, you have recently there, and I know they tried to mean this as ironic, but there was this basically like Greek icon image. It was not Greek, sorry. It was like a Raphael painting of Joe Biden with like the Predator drones, and it was in Jacobin magazine. And to me, a lot of these irony bros are like, oh, it's ironic, man. But to me, that's indicative of the current epoch of what I like to term neoliberal kitsch, because it is a deculturation in the sense of gutting unique culture itself, because now culture becomes the enemy, and the mono anti-culture of what is around the globe, which, you know, people talk about globalization being Americanization. It's true, because now we have the domestic political situation in America becoming globalized. So now in various regions of the world, they're almost like cargo culting what's happening in America. So the aesthetic realm plays into this, because now we have protest art that mimics domestic issues in America being imported throughout the world. And so now we have this sort of gutting of localist cultures to basically in the service of ideology and in the service of the forces of deculturation, the culture industry itself. And politics plays a large role in this. I mean, every sort of major Hollywood movie has a political dimension. Everything is subservient to a particular neoliberal ideological apparatus, which creates, and the reason I call it kitsch is because it's creating a world unto itself that isn't within the general sort of history of art. It's more of like protest art seems very singular, very in the moment, very sentimental. Therefore, it doesn't have, I mean, social realism is the exception. There was a lot of works that did withstand the test of time. But the protest art that's being created now, I feel, is kitschy in the sense of political kitsch, because it has a self-contained world that doesn't speak to any sort of like future or past. It is firmly within the moment. And I feel that that is the problem with the contemporary art world, in the sense of it's only producing art that is within a certain cultural moment nowadays, and it doesn't speak to eternity in some ways. I mean, there is artwork in the contemporary world that does speak to eternity, but it's very hard to find. For example, like Jenny Saville is an artist I admire. Her artwork is what I would consider speaking to eternity. But I don't know. I feel that that's the problem inherently with a lot of political art in general, is that the stuff that's in vogue now, it's not going to be in vogue within not even like 10 years, 5 years, put it that way. And now that we're
agree, I think the art that's being made now is totally historic, and it's going to be passed on, because now we're digital, where everything's digital. Everything's going to be able to be spread and shared for the future.
Yes and no, but at the same time, I feel that
I also want to get to Nina right after.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel.
Yeah, Nina, jump in.
Yes and no. Yeah, jump in, Nina.
All right. What unites people is enemies, and if they don't have external enemies, they
Carl Schmidt.
Scapegoats. Scapegoats play an important role in uniting people. And if I have learned anything in the last 5 years, it's that humans are irredeemably tribal, and they behave tribally. And so in a lot of ways, I disagree with Owen's position that there are these really fundamental differences of these two tribes. I'm like, no, people have split into two tribes, and they just pick up anything in opposition to the opposing tribe. Both tribes have anti-science strain. One of them denies what's called climate science. The other one denies biology. One of them has what's called right-wing Christianity, or some kind of fundamentalist Christianity. The other one has what they insist is secular, but is also a religion, and it's like you have religious oppositions and ideological oppositions that in many ways have just sort of come into being through opposition.
Nina, look, this isn't the early 2000s. Those distinctions are kind of jumbled up nowadays.
Wait,
There's a lot of right-wing environmentalism going on now.
Wait, so I have a question that I want to take it a little bit. So you're saying that anti-science in like a bad way, and you're saying tribalism in like a bad way, right? Obviously.
Well, all right. I'm not saying it in a bad way because it's part of being human. I have been seriously, I mean, I've been in the role of scapegoat, right? Like I provide the service of tribal cohesion, and it's traumatizing and it really sucks.
So it's bad.
Well, it's bad for the scapegoat. It's also good because it's loving and bonding for everybody else, right? You know, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or whatever. It's like I've thought a lot about
others may die. So sorry
about being a scapegoat. It's just how it is, right? I mean, it's like eating, right? It's like, oh, killing is bad. Well, guess what? You got to kill things to eat, right? You got to kill to live. So is killing bad? Is living bad? I mean, this is just how it is. Humans are deeply, deeply tribal. And, you know, this conflict, it's never going to be resolved. There are times of what appear to be more or less peace, but humans are not, you know, we're not like a peaceful, static species. I mean, there's a reason that in religions, you know, heaven is when you're dead, right? That's,
I guess if I was just going to push a little further though, if it's not bad, why would it need to be resolved? Like, it's just interesting because I totally agree
because people are trying to resolve it, right? Like everyone has this idea. It's like, oh, how do we unite? And it's like,
yeah, well, those people are millenarians and you know what happens at the end of every millenarian project, whereas like instantiating a heaven on earth, eminentizing the eschaton, you know what happens with every single time.
So am I the millenarian in this case, Gio? When I want
I don't know. I mean, have you killed a few million people?
Like, we all have the desire to unite, right? We all have the desire to connect. We also have the desire and the need to defend ourselves, right? We're all profoundly individual and we're also profoundly social. We all want to merge. We all can't merge, right? We'll die if we merge. It's not going to stop.
Well, it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating because I totally agree with you, but I am wondering. So I don't see. It's just interesting because you're saying it as though it is a negative, inherently negative thing. I guess I'm putting words in your mouth now, but I totally agree. Humans are basically tribal. It's a condition of reality. We'll never be able to change it ever under any circumstances. That's how the world works. But then I feel like we should just work inside of that and not try and fix a problem that can never be solved.
But we do long for unity, right? Like, I mean, part of the irony of it is we have built into us this longing for it not to be that way. And that's always going to be that way too.
But again, that's the longing for the eternal. And so to address with Georgia, what you were saying, you were critiquing my point. I feel you're correct in the sense that a lot of the art that's being produced, a lot of the, like, what would you call it, woke protest art, it's a taxonomy of current events. It's a cartography of current events. And in that sense, it has a permanence. But when art becomes just cartography, and we could talk about this when we talk about psychedelia and how art that is produced from the psychedelic experience, is it art or is it just a cartography of experience, right? So it's, to me, I feel that it has a permanence, but my problem is that now that we're dealing with a political spectacle that is largely generated by certain, whatever you want to call it, cathedral, blue empire, power structures, I feel that a lot of what's promoted ostensibly, like for example, like the one painting that was making the rounds with millions of views and retweets, where it's like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris hugging, and like Ruth Bader Ginsburg is like a saint above with like Elijah Cummings and stuff like shit like that. To me, it's kitsch because it's referent to a celebration of the political order that is fundamentally alienating to a lot of people, including on the left and right. And so this is what I mean by neoliberal kitsch, and that doesn't have permanence. It is, a celebration of the current order, whereas a lot of protest art was a rebellion against a certain order. And so that is the difference between what is good protest art that is meaningful, and to me at least, and what is being promoted that ostensibly has sort of like a backdoor implicit consent to the order of things. And I don't know, it's complicated because with the Trump thing, because a lot of Trumpian protest art is like, I don't know.
It's very kitschy. It's very kitschy.
It's very kitschy in the sense,
especially the ones with the presidents painted around Trump, and they're like, they're like the bad presidents who are
no, but that's pro-Trump. That's like very few. That's like fucking McNaughton. Like Trump is like in a poker table with Richard Nixon. Like that's so ridiculous. But the other side of that, where like, which is protest art, like where like Trump has like pussy lips, and Trump is like a lot of like boomer sexual imagery when it came to Trump, like Putin and Trump making love, and it's just a lot of this stuff is very repetitive. It's very like,
so what do you think about Diego Rivera's murals?
No, but see, that's the difference. But Diego Rivera, as like his murals transcend time, even though they're ostensibly political protest art. They had
your opinion as someone from a future generation, so I don't really think you can speak for the future generations.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I feel that the difference is that Diego Rivera was doing things that were genuinely subversive, whereas my argument is that a lot of protest art that gets promoted is fully endorsed by the neoliberal order, and that's why it's sort of like, Soviet realism, put it that way. A lot of Soviet realism didn't withstand the test of time compared to the Silver Lake painters and the Soviet futurists before them that were crushed by the Stalinists because it was in service of a regime. That's my argument. There is art that is in service of a regime that does, that is meaningful and lasts the test of time.
I mean, and it doesn't mean that this regime, let's say, quote unquote regime, would not be a regime that would be able to, let's say, keep balance right now and be like the best out of all the worst options people would have in this case.
No, but on the other side, I feel like McNaughton paintings where Trump is playing poker with Richard Nixon or Trump is like draining the swamp. It's so fucking stupid and ridiculous. That's equally as ridiculous because it's within a particular time period that no one's going to remember, or people will remember, but they won't remember it in the same way that John McNaughton does, where he's painting Trump like having playing poker with Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Jux had a great comment. She said, "Do you know what's art? Lost Cherry by Tom Ford." I did not see Lost Cherry, but I am a big fan of Tom Ford's movie that I saw, Gone Girl. I really enjoyed that one. Georgia, did you see Gone Girl?
Tom Ford did not do Gone Girl. That was David Fincher.
Wait, that was David... No, oh, sorry. No, Tom Ford, he didn't do Gone Girl, but he did the other one that I really liked. He did the one...
Nocturnal Animals.
Yeah, Nocturnal Animals. That's
it. I mean, that movie was horrible, but at least now we got...
Horrible. I really enjoyed it. I don't know. Nina, Georgia,
but for example, Diego Rivera's... Sorry, I had to cut you off, Lev. I have to finish this point.
I know.
Diego Rivera's Ford mural, okay? Diego Rivera's Ford mural. Okay, so ostensibly an anti-capitalist, a communist, Diego Rivera, paints this timeless mural to futurism and industrialism that is not alienating the working class. Then like people at the Ford plant, they were like, oh yeah, that looks good because it's a bunch of machinery, but they didn't get the subtle meaning behind that mural. That is, to me, that is timeless because it's not in your face. It's not like just I don't want
political cartoon.
Well, it's not political. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Gavantus. It's not just a political cartoon. It's not just like,
don't be denigrating political cartoons.
No, but even the subtlety of it, like you have like people like Matt Boers or like Jim Carrey's drawings, and on the other side you have fucking Ben Garrison. It's so in your face. It doesn't have that subtlety to it.
It's like that.
Sorry, I'm getting excited. I know this is Owen's
no, it's
show.
Good. You should get excited. No, you should get excited.
It's like that Akira. It's like the Akira Kurosawa show. Not show. A movie. Where not movie quote. Where people asked him, like, what was the message, Kurosawa-san, that you wanted to send with your movie? And he said something, I'm misquoting it, but it was sort of like, if I had, like, one message to send, I would just write down a note. So I think, Georgia, what Gio is getting to is two things. That the things that are being on display right now, Gio sees them as being too, like, this is what it is, and there's nothing more to it. And
I really do have to write the book on neoliberal catch. I have to write.
But the second thing, which also I think is important, something like, regardless again of any political affiliation that anybody here has, we can agree that as far as there being like underdogs, and what's the opposite of an underdog? A up dog or above dog? I don't know.
No, I'll give you an example. Okay, I'll give you an example. You know, the corporations that commission street artists to do murals, street artist murals in the style of OG graffiti tagging, and they're of course tag bait to real taggers, because I truly believe that tagging is like one of the last great outsider art forms. But that shit is, to me, is so disgusting, because you're taking something that was rebellious and stylistically of the streets, because people don't know this, but tagging actually predated hip hop itself, right? So to take that and for corporations to like pay Banksy to put a mural out, and like, for example, he did the one mural where it's like the EU and it's like one star is being chipped out because it's Brexit. Like, to me, that is just art that supports a particular consensus among the elites, is just, to me, terrible. But Georgia, I do appreciate you pushing back on me, because nobody does that a lot. Yeah. And people should push back on me more for my pseudo-intellectual bullshit. So I do. I mean, I want to.
I'll tell you something. I may be living in New York City, and I may be totally New York City through and through, but I did put a lot of time in Houston, Texas. So I'm used to fighting the fight.
Texas, boy.
I would complicate it a little bit and kind of tie it back into some earlier stuff, because I think that the intuition, a tiny piece of what you're saying, like, I'm going to oversimplify it, but like, this is subversive, and I'm seeing something there that I'm not seeing in this non-subversive art. I think that that's definitely true, but if we took that all the way, not that you're doing this, but if I was going to accelerate it to like 100 miles an hour, the thing is, though, with any like traditional sacred art, that kind of was made by the elite. If you look at Tibetan paintings or Catholic art,
right,
or anything like that, even like a Luther Bible or something with the etchings, that, I mean, maybe not at the time, but the point is that a lot of religious art is made by the elite in service of the status quo, yet it is still very beautiful and eternal. So the thing
but those were different elites, though. Those were
that's what I'm saying, is that I think I think a lot of what you're responding to, like the Banksy thing, really nailed it for me, because I think that maybe it probably sounds kind of absurd, but I think that at a deep level, because of the ideology it's serving, it's anti-human, and I think that that's what people are responding to. Like, it's either highlighting something that's just like, isn't this kind of bad? You should think it's bad too. Like, that's the message sometimes, or it's highlighting some negative aspect of humanity in this way that serves this like larger anti-human view, that I think that even if people are totally unaware of it, I think that people sense that and respond to it and recoil from it.
Well, it's Paul Talk in the chat. Holy crap. Paul Talk, you have to come in. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, friend of the show. Paul Talk.
Nina?
It's tribal propaganda. I mean, it's like the whole thing with communities and bonding and things like that. There's a dark side to it. And sometimes I substitute the word cult for community. We all long to be part of a community, and we think of communities as good, right? Communities are good, cults are bad. Well, guess what? They're the same thing. And a lot of this art, it serves that function. And same thing with religious art, right? Like, religious art is going to cement the cult.
Well, the thing is, though, isn't it really anti-tribal propaganda? The Banksy piece you're talking about, saying, Brexit's bad, that's anti-tribal propaganda. It's pushing the worldview that English people shouldn't be tribal. And I feel like
but there's more than one tribe, right? Like, it's like what I was saying before about unity through enmity. If you have an ideological enemy of any type, then you're going to have tribal cohesion of those who oppose it.
If you have ideological cohesion of any type, you're going to have tribal unity against those who oppose it.
Right. So in other words, let's say you and I are like, I hate intolerant, or like we just notice intolerant people, right? Like, let's say we're really tolerant and those other people are really intolerant.
The paradox of tolerance, Nina?
And we're going to be like feeling so bonded by our enmity of those intolerant people who we will of course exclude. I mean, this has happened. This has played out.
But don't you think that's good? Don't you think that's a good thing, though?
Oh, yeah, great. It's like really great when a bunch of people who promote inclusion do so by excluding people. that's what's been happening. I mean, it's like a parody. Like the last 5 years have been a parody of themselves. The people that preach inclusion the most do it through the most vicious and aggressive exclusion of people that even question them or disagree with them. And the thing is, this is true of all ideologies, including the ones that I favor. I mean, radical feminism, right? Like I really like a lot of radical feminist writings. I feel like they're a really good antidote to a lot of cultishness. However, radical feminism is as at risk of becoming a cult as anything else. And what's wrong with cults? Most people are in cults. You know, I'd like to have my own cult.
Everyone is a part of a political cult nowadays.
Everyone's or a non-political cult. You know, like fandoms are cults. They're communities and they're cults. And
although Gio may argue that those are political cults.
Well, maybe, but the thing, like having been on both sides of this, right? Like when a group of people become fans of an artist and they just freaking adore the artist, those same fans will be the first to throw stones or burn the artist if the artist disappoints them. You know, the scapegoat is like a lot of kings become scapegoats, right? Like it's the inversion. I mean, Jesus Christ is a great example of a scapegoat, right? He was, you know, hated and he was nailed to a cross, and you know,
he's more of a scape lamb, you know, Lamb of God. But
well, that's what the goat is as well. Actually, the goat and the lamb were how can I say that? It's a whole thing talking about the language of goats and lambs. It's true that Jesus separated them, but they were synonymous in the Old Testament.
I remember that one Behemoth concert in Poland that got them banned, where they're like, well, the goat is like an individual man, and like the lamb is just a follower man, and so they like had the goat. Never mind, it's just a stupid metal point. But
yeah,
I feel
sheep
sorry
go
for
to
the
heaven
goats.
and goats go to hell. Sheep.
Georgia, do you like goats? Are you a fan of goats?
Oh, I'm gonna send the sheep to hell too.
Yeah, that's right.
I know, Georgia.
Anyway, what the hell was I even talking about? I had some point. I hope it came across, whatever the hell it was.
Well, we were talking about all these differences, and then if we can unite people, and then we were talking about art. And when it comes to
inclusion, right.
Yes.
Right. My whole thing. It's like we have this shadow thing. It's like we haven't integrated our shadow about communities and unity and things like that. There's a dark side to unity.
Just look at this chat.
A dark side to unity.
Don't look at the chat.
I love that.
I should tell people just like put
no
some tape over it.
Chat. What are you talking about? I mean,
because unity implies
Italian.
Well, unity. Oh God, dark side. Oh, I get it now. I get it.
Yeah, I guess there's just something. I can't tell if I should dig for it. There's something interesting that I am responding to in the way that you're phrasing it. And I think it's because like what you're saying could also apply like to a family. I have a family, so I have people who are not my family. But the thing is, I feel like the subtext is that you see it as pathological in some way. But for me, it's a condition of reality that's actually positive. I mean, yeah, having a group entails an outgroup. But the thing is, when I look at all the good things about being human, those are conditional on the exact thing that we're describing. I go to France and have French food. I don't, because I don't have any money, but I could go to France and have French food and French wine and French literature and French culture and these beautiful buildings that are some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, and go to China and go to South America. And it's all conditional on these groups. So I actually just feel like
yet
it's
there's
a
a
positive
McDonald's
thing,
everywhere
ultimately.
though. But yet there's a McDonald's everywhere.
Yeah, but if they were
That's
more,
the
but
problem.
if they were more tribal, there wouldn't be a McDonald's.
Exactly.
If they were more bundled up, and if they were more defensive of their culture,
I remember
there wouldn't be a McDonald's.
I remember Varg Vickner said when the first McDonald's came to Norway, there were people that shot at it, right? So that I don't know if that was true or if that was just Varg being Varg, but that's like, this is what I mean by deculturation, is that the globalization of the world has bred this like odd like monoculture, which is in essence an anti-culture, because now that there's a McDonald's in every block, there is like genuine culture of these people become trinkets. And I feel that that's my critique of multiculturalism. Not that I like hate other cultures, because in my country it's like basically state ideology. My critique of multiculturalism is that it doesn't breed a pluralism, it breeds homogeneity that has to crush the uniqueness in other cultures in order to make people get along to go along. And I don't know. And then you end up with like ethnic enclaves that are like, for example, in Toronto, like that's basically like New York, right? Like there's people that have various ethnic enclaves. And I feel that cultural plurality can only come about when people have a sure understanding of their own culture, then they can truly appreciate the other.
By your definition, I was screwed over from the start. I mean, my mom's Mexican, right? And my dad's a Brooklyn
right.
Jew. So, I mean, what am I supposed to do?
But that's, but that's the thing, right? Like, I mean,
Georgia, actually, I'm wondering, did I meet you before?
Maybe.
Did we meet at this conference? Was it in Philadelphia?
It would have had to have been in
religion and art.
I don't know. I didn't go to one in Philadelphia, but it might have been something else that happened in New York City.
Or maybe not New York City. No, in like South Carolina or something. I don't know. I don't know if you attended a conference about religious art.
You do seem familiar.
Please.
Yeah, I think we talked. Like when you said that, I think we had an interesting conversation. Actually,
well, since you said that though, it actually is interesting in the context of everything we've been talking about, which has gone on a pretty long road away from art, but it is interesting since it came up. So you said, you're half. I forget what you just said. You're half Mexican and half Jewish. Is that what you said?
Sure. Exactly.
Okay.
We talked.
Which culture? What culture do you identify with?
One that's most convenient at the time of.
Hey! Damn it! Damn no! Don't say that, please. Do not. Oh God.
I mean, actually, I'm actually wondering. Is that actually how you feel?
Oh no!
What?
Now the chat is going to explode.
Is that actually how you feel? I'm actually wondering.
What do you mean how I feel?
Like if you had to say I belong to X culture, how would you answer that question?
Why can't I answer it fluidly?
You can. No, I'm just wondering what your answer is. I'm not like grilling you to prove a point. I'm actually curious.
You're making a joke.
Well,
no, I'm not making a joke. I'm
I'd
actually
like
curious.
to sign up for being a global citizen.
Okay.
Oh.
Why?
I know, Gio. Let's go.
No,
go.
I don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry.
I'm a I'm 12.5% Italian, 25% Irish. That means 37.5% person of color, baby. Say it.
I am 100% person of color because I'm Italian, according to Sunny New York's.
Okay, well, I would defend myself by saying that I'm actually a dual citizen. So I have 2 citizenships, and I've spent time and went to high school in Mexico. So.
Okay.
I'm a citizen of Long Island and a citizen of New York City, baby.
So Owen, I want to know why Owen wants to know.
Well, because we're talking. I think it's interesting because we're talking about inculturation and being part of a culture and things like that, and you kind of brought it up as like an own. Not that you were being malicious. It's the context of the conversation. But like, well, what about me? I'm halfway between these 2 cultures. But that kind of proves the point. It proves that those 2 cultures are 2 separate things. And then you're saying, well, what about me? I'm stuck in the middle. It doesn't prove that.
Well, I was making the point that I'm a fully realized, amazing human. I don't see myself as an oddity. So therefore, Gio is wrong.
We're all united by the fact that.
Oh my God.
I
will concede that. Okay, like I feel that I agree with Nietzsche that monocultures tend to produce unique art in the sense that there isn't a lot of recognition of sort of like backgrounds of other peoples that can be alien to certain cultures. So that's what Friedrich Nietzsche said in The Birth of Tragedy, I think. But I do feel that when it comes to people reconciling a larger culture that immigrate. So for example, like the New York school was basically built on a lot of immigrants like Rothko, like Urshel Gorky, who took their influences. I'm really specifically thinking of Gorky, who was an Armenian. I believe he was he Jewish as well? I forget, but he really took those influences and he created an abstract expressionism that was beholden to a lot of the culture, the more Arab-esque cultures that he was exposed to. So I do agree that within modernity, within a shakeup of cultural contexts, there is a sense of a recognition of the other, but also a reconciling of your own experience as an artist. And the work of art is in some ways, not to like sort of defend like, let's all sing along and hold hands, Canadian multiculturalism. But I do feel that there is a pluralism in the work of art that is expressed to the point where a lot of those contradictions can be reconciled. I think to bring this full circle, cultural differences can be not sort of flattened the way that a lot of this neoliberal kitsch art is trying to do. But when you recognize those cultural differences, when you reconcile them within the work of art, it's a more meaningful relationship than just saying, like, here's, like, for example, Humans of Flat Design, and it's like everyone's just the same, man. I feel that a lot of those immigrant artists that came from the old world to New York, like Rothko, like Anna Mendieta, like I'm thinking of who was also in when Kathy Kollwitz came, from Europe when she went to America. Like, there's a lot of artists that do bring that recognition. Diego Rivera, there you go, Diego Rivera, exactly. So he learned a lot.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you, Gio.
Yes. Sorry,
Georgia.
I'm just
Georgia,
rambling.
it was Richmond, Virginia. We met in Richmond, Virginia. There was a sacred art or religious art conference in Richmond, Virginia, the Jefferson Hotel. You're muted, by the way.
What year?
Oh man, probably 2014, 2015, something like that.
Possible.
All right.
Well, there we go. We're bringing people together who
exactly.
were brought together
We're
before.
united.
Exactly. But when it comes to, let's say, for me, I'm Russian and Jewish. So, like, my dad's Russian and my mom's Jewish. And I see these two elements being incorporated into my familial life as far as, food choices go. Because a lot of the Jews there, they lived in Russia. They incorporated food, but then they also incorporated some of the Jewish food. I don't want to make it about food, because food's like, that's the least thing that even though I like.
Well, it's a meme, Lev. It's a meme.
Yes,
like,
I know it's a meme.
Yeah,
yes,
restaurants.
But the idea still is that I think that as far as kind of like the work that I create and who I see myself as, is that I am interested in the history and I am interested in all these things, but then I decide what are the things that I want to take from it. So, for example, from Russian history, I don't want to take, like, even though I recognize that this has happened, like with my ancestors too, they were slaves under a long time, serfs, slaves, pretty much the same thing, honestly, in terms of Russian history, at least, under the Golden Horde. That's when it first started, and, the Mongolians, and then under the nobility, most of whom wasn't even Russian. And my roots are also like part nobility and then part like the Russian lower class or whatever. But the point is that when it comes to what I want to bring out, instead of bringing out that, I am more fascinated in what happened to Russia before that, before they got conquered, when they were doing all these interesting pagan rituals and, like some Hyperborean related stuff, maybe. I don't know. The point is that there's always stuff to dig into and to see, is this something that you can incorporate into your identity today? And I think all these cultures are full of a lot of rich stuff to grab onto and to incorporate. So it is something that could also create a new culture. But there are still certain things that would unite, at least for my family it did, Russian sentiments and Jewish sentiments. And it happened so much that the moment that Jewish people got to, I think this was after the Russian Empire, the Imperial Russia fell, a lot of Jewish people ended up marrying a lot of ethnic Russian people. And they didn't do it because they saw themselves as strangers. They did it because they got along. They did it because there were things that both of them were into and enjoyed doing together. And there wasn't any tension going on among the people who did that. And that I see as the natural way of, like, if there are things, you could call it cultural appropriation or whatever, but it always happens. If there are things that you want to integrate within yourself and you want to settle down with somebody who is of a different culture, but you also see that being radiated in their culture, that's a great thing. And that's how I think cultures evolve and change around over time.
Lev, yeah, that's...
Sorry, I was distracted.
Dinner. No.
That's a romantic view. I mean, just hearing you speak, I was also thinking about it in terms of like colonization and how it being a negative. But as a side note, appreciate the shout out from whoever in the chat compared me to Queen Tamar of Georgian Golden Age. So they...
Oh boy.
Wait, what
that
is
is
that?
Next level simping, by the way.
I quite like that comparison.
Look at Paul talk. What a boomer. He says Diego Rivera is overrated. They only loved him because he was a communist.
Everybody loves communists.
I don't know. I feel like, yeah, a lot of artists that I like, they were communists.
Hold on, to cut you off for a second, Gio. I think if you guys don't read the super chats, one, they're never gonna shut up, and two, you guys aren't gonna get any more super chats.
No, we're gonna read the super chats right now. I was just having some
James,
problems.
there was a lot of communist directors that even for example, films like the Potemkin, like they
Battleship Potemkin,
yeah, that wasn't real, but it was like kayfabed into reality by the Communist Party.
Oh, here we go. Super chat time. It is officially super chat time. I want to be kind to all the super chatters out there because you are quite amazing. Here we go. Okay, so, okay, here we go. Oh God. Well, okay, fine. Georgia, get ready. Okay. Number one. From Spiced, $5. This is a $5 super chat. Should I impregnate my Catholic Castiza girlfriend?
No.
I mean, sure.
Yes.
No.
Probably.
Okay. Another one from Spice.
Oh, God.
When's the... No, this one's fine.
Just don't pull out and see what
I
happens.
feel like we're mortifying George.
Yeah, James is right, actually. It's up to God, not you.
It's up to God, not yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
No, this one's fine. When is the Robert Sefer Vedic Cyber God episode? Oh, look, I've been trying to get in contact with Robert. He's not answering, so let me know. Get the guy to respond to me, damn it. Okay, anyway, Byzantium Archon donated $5. Can we get, oh no, can we get AX Senya from Georgia?
What does that mean?
I'm not gonna get into this right now. So
is it some anime thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, Georgia. We could skip that. Also, I'm not gonna subject you to this torture anymore, Georgia.
But what is it? No.
AX and what is that?
Oh God. Okay, I'm gonna explain what it is. Okay, but again, it's only because you asked. Okay, it's only because. Okay.
You asked for this.
You asked for this.
She was asking for a chat.
Welcome to your crash course of crazy internet culture.
Okay. Oh, actually, I don't even know what this is. AX, because Asia I think stands for
AXA
Asian.
is created by Pill Eater. It's Asian Aryan. It's the fusion of a futurist race of people that combine the HAPA world order between Asians and white people that will go into a glorious future, according to Pill Eater. That's what AXA is. So
okay, and next we have Wong Kar-wai.
It's the celebration of like hipster New York culture and subversive art, and created by this fusion, this HAPA fusion of people. So that is AXA. So there you go.
Don't they have that? That's like what Kazakhstan is, right? They have really good art.
Yeah, exactly. Because those Caucasus regions, they were on the border regions between the West and Asia. Therefore, they create for example, like Islamic tapestry art, for instance, is this Eastern and Western fusion that has created something so wholly like unique and interesting, right? Especially in Islamic art, because they couldn't rely on iconography. They had to rely on abstract imagery to convey a sense of the divine. So that would be like this meeting of the West and the East, which was very, apart from like, for example, the Greeks under Alexander going and creating the first Buddha statues. Those are really the only regions of the world I can think of where there was a aesthetic fusion between the East and the West, which is like that Caucasus region there. So to make an intelligent point out of internet bullshit, that is an intelligent. So sorry.
No Bactrian life. Why even live?
So,
no Bactrian.
Also, super chat from Jugs for $5 saying "Love you, Lev, Gio, and James." That's me.
Oh.
And also we have a Conscious Moss $2 super chat. I am Gio's #1 simp. Well, we said that before, but it's worth saying twice. And Super Iron Bob, well, Wong Kar-wai Superfan XOXOXO, $5 through Super Chat says, Georgia is the chat's GF now. So again, Georgia, these people, they're not gonna, look at Nina, oh my God, look at that. That is, hold on, I'm gonna spotlight this. This is incredible.
Very nice, thank you. I can't see, but my eyes are big.
Nina is creating these high heels in the style of Alex Gray. Do you have them, Nina?
Yeah.
The eye,
Yeah,
and we made
the eye
an emoji.
heels.
We
Not
made an
high
emoji
heels,
out of it.
eye heels.
Eye heels, yes.
heels. Here are the eye heels. Well, wait, I need to get back. You know, every time.
Oh, you changed them. Now they have eyelids.
They had eyelids before, but these I did change them though. I'm glad that you noticed. The eyes are, in my opinion, improved. Now, how do I?
And do you see over here? We have in our Discord server.
Yes,
we have an emoji with you in it. See?
Yeah, I can do that again. Someone can make a new emoji with the new.
Lev, where's my emoji? Come on.
Is Gio
we're all out of. Here we go. Hold on, you got to put your face a little bit higher. There we go.
Okay, there we go.
It's like Pan's Labyrinth.
No. They're a little. You got to cender them.
I can't see. They're blocking my eyes. You know.
Well, that's a function that has to be improved.
Yeah,
but
anyway, I know.
But anyway, these are really beautiful shoes. And Georgia, can you buy these shoes from Nina, or like
these are art, right? What do you think? People can invest in these shoes. This is art.
I'm sure they could go in a gallery. That they could.
Yeah, that's where they belong. Although they do fit me. Wait, where'd Georgia go? Yeah, every time there's a spotlight on someone, my gallery view ends.
Yeah, that tends to happen, but I don't think anybody is Oh, here, I'm going to get rid of... No, everything should be fine. But there was one more super chat, and we also got a new patron, by the way, and I don't know why the patron's not coming up inside of the dashboard, but I'm just going to scroll up and find this $5 patron. We have a new $5 patron, so I'm going to say that. But also over here, Super Iron Bob, $5. As an extension, you need to have a place to retreat and recoup at. Even now, your own thoughts are not to be tolerated. I don't know exactly what he's getting at there, but that's thank you very much, Super Iron Bob, for the $5. But as far as, let's say, all this cultural stuff, like Georgia, you mentioned, the conquest and colonialism. That's been the history of the world. Like, you look at any country, there's always been an empire. Iran, Middle East, Africa, there's always been empires through time immemorial that have kind of subjugated the people that were in there and kind of taken shit over and were in charge. I think the difference, and this is something that I would point to Owen Cyclops' statements from before about Christianity, and again, like me personally, even though I'm not a Christian, I could see there being something very interesting with Christianity, but also with Judaism. Like, I know that they tend to be further apart today, but as far as this necessity of going out of the circle, where, let's say, Georgia, you're absolutely right, like, there has been all kinds of horrible shit that has gone on in this world for a long time, and it's just people living the Dharma, people living in the circle, and then all of a sudden you have these things that they are also bloody, there have been a lot of Christian wars and all that, yet they are things that something starts twitching in people's heads, where they realize, you know what, maybe we shouldn't fucking kill each other over this stuff. Not everybody realizes that, but some. And I'm sorry, but I would not want to live during another time than right now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to go back in time and live during the Middle Ages and be subjected to that kind of violence.
I would.
Well, but you don't know, Gio, to be fair, you don't know if you'd be able to stand it. None of us do. Because all of us...
You can't do it anyway!
We could be mud farmers.
No, but I'm just saying here that you're right, Nina, we can't go back in time, but even if we were able to do that and live throughout that time, we are so pampered today, we would find that incredibly horrible to be able to live during that time. And maybe you could say, well, they were tough. They were tough, but at the same time, people died of very preventable diseases, women died during childbirth, a lot of horrible things. So I don't want to go back to that time. But the point is that things are improving somewhat for just like the way that people treat each other. I don't want to be one of these absent-minded optimists who just
Lev, what you're really asking about is the nature of art in relation to like cultural appropriation, whether it's a thing or not. Is that what you're asking? Like, what happens when cultures combine or cultures appropriate from one another? If that's like something that is problematic and should be addressed, or is it a thing that is that what you're getting at?
I think people will be able to get along more even if they have their own enclaves. And I think you still see that in a way. Like, you go around, you see that there are like black neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods, Chinese neighborhoods. Like, that's still at least in New York City, that's still a function. And if people would be able to respect each other regardless of what different neighborhood they happen to live in, but yet at the same time have some kind of a like, take Verse Laloon, for example, great friend of the show, and Versaloon's father happens to be an incredible dancer. He's like in a big dance company. If he were to live somewhere in, I don't know, like Mississippi or whatever, there wouldn't be this dance company for him to be interested in and to hone his craft. He had to go to the city. He had to go to New York. So maybe a good way of going about this is, hey, like, let us have different cultural enclaves that are still more or less supported by, certain guiding principles from the elite or whatever. But let's have those enclaves. And then in the city, we could have specialists, people who are interested in like dance and art and things like that. So that's what I'm proposing here, where there could be a peace between, different sides by doing that. So Owen, and Nina, by the way, has turned into a Cyclops herself, a mouth clops. I don't know exactly what to call it. But Owen, what do you think about that proposition? Can that work?
Sounds like a Kurt Vonnegut sci-fi.
Yeah. Wait, give it to me in one sentence again.
Okay. You would have different cultural enclaves in, let's say, not in the big cities. You would just have different people with different cultures, but still more or less influenced by a certain kind of Americana type culture. But they would still, be distinct. And then you would have in the big cities people who want to be specialists, who want to specialize in, where they want to make art or they want to, do whatever. And then they find other people who also come from different environments who are also into doing that same thing, which I think naturally...
That's literally Player Piano by Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Do I think that would work?
And it goes wrong. So I think we can just refer to sci-fi novels, like Ray Bradbury short stories for all of these questions we have, because
like Harrison Bergeron. Yeah.
do I think that would work? Well, the thing is, I think that, I think part of what would go wrong with that, if you're asking me about this like hypothetical scenario, is that different people groups sort of like have different ways of being, so that I think that long term you would see really weird, interesting manifestations of that. Like, I'll put it that way. You know what I mean? It's not like you have like, imagine it with animals. You know what I mean? Like, put it that way. Like if you had one group of birds here and one group of birds here and one group of birds here, they act and behave differently. They use space differently. They use resources differently. They, do everything differently.
But look at the Amish. The Amish are living their own different way in their areas. So are the Mormons. There are enclaves that live in a completely different way. So why can't that work in the bigger picture, or people respect themselves? But if people respect the other people who are, let's say, in different enclaves, but if they want to, let's say, just live in a particular kind of culture, then they can. But again, I want to stress when I'm saying this, it's still going to have this kind of sheet of American culture, or Americana, whatever you want to call it, around it, that would still be like a certain tone that like the elites would set. That would
like
also influence.
In the UK, right? With Brexit.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen with the UK. I mean, UK has another thing where they also have people who come in from Pakistan, and that's another different culture than the culture of the British working class. And there is a bit of a clash, I think, that's going down there right now.
Well,
and
one thing... Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Lev, I have...
Well, just real quick, I mean, that is an issue that is not as present in, let's say, the Indians. So you have people from India who have settled in England, since, the British Empire days. And, people get along really well. And I think that there is a cultural element, because if people from Pakistan, they're the same as the people from India as far as, where they come from. It was the same country for a long time. But culturally, there are different cultures. And that is important as far as if you are England or if you are the United States. When I'm talking about these different cultures living peacefully among each other, and to the point that Owen was bringing up, I think there should be very strict standards as far as, will these cultures, regardless of where they come from, because again, India and Pakistan, pretty much the same place, regardless of where they come from, would one of these measure up to, let's say, certain ideals or morals or whatever that we have?
The Hunger Games.
Oh God, I don't know. I haven't seen that movie in a long time. But you see what I'm talking about, Georgia, right? Like, in this way, we are not discriminating at all against people based on the color of their skin or where they come from. It's more about, is your culture at the kind of level that it would be able to get along with and mesh with some of the other cultures that would be kind of like your neighbors that would live around you. I don't know. Is that a controversial thing to say? I mean, this
Well,
is yeah.
If I could jump in for that, I think we have historical sort of examples with ethnic empires where these kind of different groups live together. The problem is the American form of governance does not work in that manner. If you look at, the Russian Empire with different ethnic groups, you have the Roman Empire, both the Western half and then later, Byzantium, the Eastern half. You have the Holy Roman Empire, you have Austria, Hungary. Those didn't have a democratic form of governance. The problem is these kind of like enclaves, if they have this ability to fight for power and there's a struggle for control, that's what's going to cause the tension. If there is a, emperor, king, whatever, where there isn't necessarily the same access of sort of like the highest office, I think it's a lot more reasonable to assume that it is possible. But just with the American form of governance where, kind of everyone is fighting for votes and senator seats and whatnot, I just don't think it's possible.
Well,
yeah, that's a great point, actually.
That's a great point.
It is a great point, but I am going to push back on that a little bit with what I was saying before about the elites. Because again, Georgia, if we're talking about the elites here, we are talking about, people who are in high positions, both in New York City, Washington, D.C., and I like these people. I think that these people, for all the faults that people on, let's say, on some of the BTR chat people are talking about, there is still something about them that maintains a certain order and a certain structure that makes sure things don't get too out of hand. Now, whether they're doing it as well right now as they could, I don't know. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is if you have these people who are in a way setting the tone for the rest of the American civilization, then they would be, through setting this tone, making sure that certain problems are addressed, certain things are, let's say, going through this filter of the blue empire, as Gio calls it, or whatever you want to call it, that makes sure that, yes, people, when they get riled up, when they think something is unjust, they get their day to rally, they get their day to have the protests and whatever, and eventually it tapers down and things return to normal and things go on as usual. And I'm not saying things went great in 2020. There were a lot of problems. But would you give any credence at all to this idea of sometimes there have to be people, whether through deception or through any other means, that they would be able to maintain an orderly control while at the same time allowing people to pursue their interests and go up the economic ladder and all that? Like, I don't think we're that far away from a reality that would be able to work for a lot of people in America. I think the devil is in the details, though. But anyway, Gavantus, that would be my, my retort. Do you agree with it? Is there any?
I would just, yeah. That has kind of like an underlying assumption that I guess the elites of today have some sense of like the noblesse oblige, this like obligation of nobility, and they don't. The kind of movers and shakers, those who, shift the levers of power, they really don't care about the person, who's struggling at home, who lost their jobs, about to get evicted. They don't care. We can talk about corruption and, the faults of sort of pre-democratic society, the nobility of old, but they still had this sense, idealized, of course, that they had some obligation to those below them. They don't have that today. The hedge fund managers right now, they don't care.
Well, I don't mean the hedge fund managers, but can we really, because I know that this is something that's been resonating a lot through through conversations that have been going on Twitter, but can we really say all of them? Is there not one? Is there not a couple of people who are working within the elite structure? Like Georgia, for example, like you must know people who have a heart, who want to help people out, who are living in New York City, and who are, within art world, finance, government, whatever, and they're nice people and they want to help people out. Because I can't imagine this idea that all of them are just they don't care at all. They don't
But it's
care about what
incentives
happens.
to buy into the system. That's, I guess, the meta point. Is that?
But I think everybody
you
has
have
these
to, like,
incentives.
sell your soul.
I mean, there are. I mean, I don't know. There are aspects of that too. But again, it's like life is complicated. I don't want to reduce life to this black and white us versus them battle where it's romantic. It's romantic to think that we are now going to fight against the elites and yada, yada, yada. I get it. But at the same time, shit, I want it to be a little bit more nuanced than that, you know? I think it is more nuanced than that. Like, Georgia, like, what has been your personal experience, you know, being, like, with New York and National Arts Club and all that? Like, we've both met people who I think are very nice people who want to help people out. Like, this idea that everybody's just, like, been seduced by wealth and would, you know, that everybody would sell their own mother for an extra dime. I think it's ridiculous.
Well, I know you're talking to Georgia, but as far as I can tell, everybody means really well. I mean, very, very rich people, they think that they're saving the world. I mean, the people that deplatformed my film also had the highest purpose for it. So
sure.
Regardless of the effects of what people are doing, they mean really well, which is why we say the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
They mean well, and it also might include a tax incentive.
Exactly.
I wanted to address something. I think, yeah, the problem is the system, but to get back to the main conversation, this is a thread that Owen posted a few days ago about the nature of creativity and artists trying to, again, what I was saying before about the collapse of signifiers and cultural meta-narratives. So just really quickly, so he's talking about new symbols, synthetic nature of sound. So he's talking about total art, so the synthesis of sound and image and so forth. He says,
I want to hear about new symbols.
Yeah, he says, so any new symbol would require some type of initiation, which brings me to the last point. Of course, art and spirituality are enmeshed, and I use the word imitation here unintentionally, so mimesis would be the higher concept, in a way that the same lust for the new that characterize. So again, the shock of the new becomes the lust for the new. Again, another plug to Robert Hughes. In a way that's the same as the lust for the new that characterizes modern spirituality that we see in arts of the New Age movement, for instance. Specifically in a certain type of artist, that's lust for the new can manifest as occultism, New Age, looking to other nations, pursuing psychedelic, psychic spectral phenomenon, shamanism, a desperate turning over of every rock to find something new, something so forgotten that it seems new to us. But ultimately, we're rooted in a history. If you uproot a plant, you kill it, usually. So the answer to this is to tap into a primordial wellspring of human creativity that has theological elements, or in order to see what is unique about your time, place that provides new context. The primordial wellspring of human creativity exists beyond time, isn't conditioned by provisional reality, what Jung would call conscious criticism. The neophilic lust for new spiritual seeker often returns home. I think most artists, if they press hard enough against the fog in their mind will see the same thing. So I totally agree. I feel that this is what we were talking about, like me and Georgia. I think that's the basic, when we were having a little disagreement. I feel that there has to be a sort of rootedness to the creation of the work of art that is not impossible, but changes and is fundamentally sinuous and tangential and ripped apart with our new digital epoch. So to find that rootedness within one's own cultural space or religious space or ideological space even is becoming increasingly difficult with a lot of, like, there is no longer any sort of autonomous space where you can retreat into and create art from a collective cultural understanding. It can be done, but it's difficult. But then, like, what you're saying and what other people are saying is to just, like, go headlong and embrace it and embrace this reality. But yet at the same time, it ties into this issue of cultural appropriation, because I do agree that it's a thing and that there's problems with it. Although I do also agree that art has always evolved to have, like, this cross-cultural diffusion. But at the same time, when it comes to, for example, indigenous artists carving their own space away from this collective, I don't know. I like Owen is saying something so profound here, not to like, fanboy him, but I feel that it's true that when artists try to create new symbols and say like, I can basically dump my cultural baggage and create something totally new, I feel that that's really a big yoke that has weighed down artists for the better part of 60 years now. And I don't know, I feel that there really is, it's a difficult question. I don't know. I mean, what does the panel think?
All right, I'm supposed to interrupt you. I wrote an essay several years ago called The Cult of Originality, which I think also addresses this. So if you just Google my name plus Cult of Originality, you'll find my thoughts on this. There's a great book I love called Impro by Keith Johnstone, and he talks about improvisers being terrible when they try to be original, and that when they're excellent when they don't try to be original. Like, you can't help it. It's like originality isn't a thing that you control, right? You will appear original if you are simply honest, if you just do the next thing.
Yeah.
And trying to be original is
as much as
errand. As
much as I despise and hate him to my core, Jerry Saltz did have a good point where he said that like, don't, like, artists that try to be original aren't, and they really should just do something well instead of like doing something original. So that is like the one good point he had in his entire criticism emporium. But like, that's sorry, we will get Jerry Saltz one day on the show, and I will just give him a verbal smackdown. So
but you don't even have, I mean, Johnstone also says just try to have an average day, that you can also mess yourself up by trying to be great. And so just do the work, just do it, say the thing. I have a sign on my wall that says, pay attention, tell the truth, courage. And for me, that's what being an artist is about. You just pay attention and tell the truth. And to do that, you need courage, right? So it's a little reminder.
Is that not wrapped up in identity then? In not showing one's identity, are you not telling the full truth about your art?
Not showing one's identity? Well, you're not hiding your identity. What's this bit about identity?
I mean, your personal, like who you are and what your background is and where you come from. And
I'm not interested in hiding that. I would never hide it, and I feel that it actually comes through.
If it's related, in the sense that, is it possible to be original and not, come forward with who you are to the world?
But the not coming forward part, I mean, that would be hiding, right? Like, I think what Owen's talking about is that the cult of the artist becomes more important than the art. That it's more about a celebrity personality than the actual work.
It also definitely. Oh, sorry.
Oh, and I was just going to say that, like, I've tried to be really honest about who I am. I mean, I don't know if you saw Sita Sings the Blues, but I included a personal story in Sita Sings the Blues to clarify that I was not telling the Ramayana, that I was, rooted from a particular place, which I had hoped would be obvious anyway. But I went out of my way to make it even more obvious for
but sadomasochism is a much better exploration of your own identity, Nina, wouldn't you say? Like, it's your personal.
No, I wouldn't say at all. And I think
you're like literally interviewing your father about Judaism. Like, isn't that like
that? I mean, identity is an absurd concept. It's like we have them, and it's more interesting to other people. As far as Jewish identity, my stance on that is, I don't really care about it, but I am honest. There are simply facts about my
I made a whole movie, but I don't care about.
Well,
I don't care about Jewish identity. It's like my father came from a religious. It's like there are actual facts.
No, but this is what made it
shaped my life. And the thing is that you could identify as a Jew if you wanted.
No.
You could identify as anything you want, and I don't care. I really don't care what your identity is.
No, but sadomasochism is such an intimate exploration of you coming to terms with your past and your collective history that it comes out. It's revealing. And I feel that in some ways, like a lot of artists, they're not aware of the impact. I feel that it's going on here. I feel that you're not even aware of how much the film is so predicated on your own identity. I feel that
no, it's very personal,
sort of,
but wait, no, I have a semantic difference with you with your use of the word identity.
That's
what this is about. It's not.
Sorry, we're cutting off Owen. Sorry, Owen, please.
Yeah.
I will totally take the bait that was cast out, because it also definitely is possible to be honest while hiding your identity, because that's literally what I do.
What you're doing right now.
I was trying to call you out.
Well, yeah, you could even say it's a unique type of honesty. I wouldn't say that it's inherently more honest, but that's why people write things anonymously. That's why people, use that format. I mean, if you ask, even in a mundane manner, if you're wearing an outfit and you ask 5 people that you know personally, how do I look? And then you take 10 people and they give you anonymous feedback, who are you going to get more honest answers from? Anonymity and not being tied back into your mundane everyday life and the need to maintain like a personal identity over time confers a unique type of honesty.
But do you feel that it has played into your art, the fact that you are an anonymous artist, that
100%.
You feel that you're freer with